I saw the spirit of fear in a very dramatic way, because I hadn't been in New Guinea for very long when I heard the word SANGUMA. I said, SANGUMA? That's a new word for my vocabulary. What is SANGUMA? I asked everybody, explain SANGUMA to me, and I would see the spirit of fear in people's eyes. I said, what is it? What's it? Why is it making you so fearful? I'm speaking of Christians now who showed fear when this word was mentioned. Nobody would tell me. And I was out on a walkabout. My walkabouts would take 2 or 3 weeks usually, through jungles that were some of the thickest on earth. Never see the sky or the sun because the jungle's so thick. Walking through swamps up to your middle sometimes, leeches clinging over your legs. I found out how to deal with them. You rub salt on your legs and I don't like it. Magnificent birds. It's such a land of contrast as you're going through the jungles, up and down the mountains. And I had a couple of young New Guinea missionaries with me and a brand new Australian missionary that the dear brethren had decided they wanted me to train in. I felt I needed some training myself. They'd given me no training, no preparation. I'd been plucked out of the big city. Thank you. I don't know what it is in my throat there that's tickling me. It's very, very insightful of you. The gift of discernment coming through here. Huh? Thank you very much. I will now imbibe. Pardon? Not yet, anyway. Thank you. And the brethren asked me to take this young man who had the spirit of fear. I think they sent him to the wrong country. You're going to die with the spirit of fear in a place like New Guinea, believe me. And if you haven't moved into belief, and you haven't realized that in Jesus there is nothing to fear, because, as I said yesterday, he has already taken on the devil and defeated him. He's got nothing on you. Just the mention of the name of Jesus, you know what he does, don't you? He flees. I wish I could run into a few Christians who believed that, instead of practicing the spirit of fear. So here I am hampered by a young man who's arrived in New Guinea that week with the spirit of fear. And I am about to discover the meaning of SANGUMA. I'm a very curious mortal by nature. And in New Guinea I wanted to know what was going on and why everything was happening and what it meant. I went after it. That's not the spirit of fear, believe me, it's the spirit of inquiry. And we're traipsing along through these jungles and these marshes and swamps, and one of the young New Guinea missionaries turned to me and he says, okay, you want to understand SANGUMA? I said, yes. Well, he said, in English it's called magic. I said, okay, it's magic. How does it work? And he said to me, have you ever seen a man in this area having a haircut? I'd never thought about that. I said, well, because there are no barber shops or hair salons, I said, I guess I haven't ever seen a man having a haircut, but they all seem to have haircuts. Where do they get them? And he grinned at me and he said, well, you'll never see a man having a haircut because in SANGUMA, all you need is a piece of hair or a piece of fingernail, two very concentrated parts of the human body filled with mana, or spiritual power. And if you wish to kill an enemy, follow him secretly into the jungle where he will cut his hair and fingernails and bury it. After he's gone, dig it up. Take it back to your village and work SANGUMA. You can kill him. And the first word that came to my mind, in pidgin English we say Giaman. And Giaman means phooey. I don't buy it. In fact, I don't believe it. You can't kill somebody with a piece of hair. And the young missionary looked at me and he said, Pastor, close up now by you sabi. You're going to see it for yourself soon. I said, okay. So on we walked. By the way, this is like virgin territory. There's only been one government patrol through this area before me. And because that patrol wasn't eaten, the government decreed it was now safe for missionary work. That's food for thought, isn't it? And so here I was, entering into new villages where people came out to feel your skin and your hair just to see if you were real. My kids, who all had white hair practically, used to run and hide behind the trees because everybody in the village would want to feel their hair to see if it was real. These are people who think that an aeroplane is a giant bird. They've never known anything outside of their village. I made the mistake of carrying with me a little battery-projected movie projector where you had to turn the handle to crank it and show a movie. And I made the mistake of bringing a movie of wild animals from Africa. I lost the audience in 10 seconds. They ran screaming into the woods, fearful of these horrible creatures that were coming towards them on the veldt. They've seen nothing outside of their little village. They know nothing. And finally we came to the first heathen village. And the young missionary said to me, close up now, you look in SANGUMA. You're going to see SANGUMA in action. He said, they're practicing it in the village. And I said, how do you know? The thing that used to always intrigue me in New Guinea was that they always knew in advance what was happening. These are people, by the way, that communicate with trees. That's really branching out, isn't it? They communicate with trees. I sat down one day and spent a whole day trying to talk to a tree. You could say I was out on a limb, but it just, stop it. It just didn't work. I couldn't cross that bridge and communicate with trees. But these people, they communicate with trees. I'm serious. They get messages. And this is not spiritism. This is a contact with the natural world that we seem to have educated ourselves away from. They have an affinity for nature. So we walk into this heathen village. It's one of life's great sights. If you can picture 150 naked men, their bodies covered in pig's grease, in a circle, dancing up and down, beating their little drums, singing. They'd been dancing for 48 hours. They were kind of in a daze. And in the middle of the circle, the witch doctor crouched down over a smoking little fire. My colleague ran and hid behind a tree, the spirit of fear. I pushed through the circle and went over to see what the witch doctor was doing. My curiosity again got the better of me. Never occurred to me I might be in danger. And I went over and knelt down next to the witch doctor, and he looked up at me and grinned, black teeth, red lips from chewing betel nut, smoked eyes. And he grinned at me and he said, you like look him? I said, yes, I want to see it. Me work him SANGUMA. I'm doing SANGUMA. And I looked carefully into the little fire, and he had a sweet potato, which in New Guinea we call a cow-cow. When you cook it, by the way, underground, that's called the moo-moo. So when you're hungry, you just moo-moo your cow-cow in New Guinea. The language is great. And he had a sweet potato there, and stuck into it were little tufts of hair. and fingernails. And I asked him where he got it. He said, we followed a man from the next village into the jungle. We stole it from where he'd buried it. We've sent him a message to tell him that we have it, and he is now preparing to die. And I said, Gammon. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. He said, oh, you look him, you'll see. And he explained to me, he had a little vine tied around the potato, and he started to tighten it. He said, every time I pull it and tighten it, the man is feeling sick. They're very dramatic, the New Guineans. They like to dramatize everything. And he was explaining to me, the man is sick, he's lying down. His wife is asking him all the time, what is it? And he's saying, oh, big fella something. Want him something, what is it? SANGUMA. I'm dying. And he's describing to me that the tighter he pulled it, the closer the man was to death. And I said, yeah, you can't kill a man with a bit of hair. Finally, the dancing got more and more intense. He pulled the vine so tight that the sweet potato broke in half. All of the men in the circle fell flat on their backs like dead men. There was a moment of silence, and the witch doctor looked up at me and grinned at me, and he said, let me die finished. He's just died. And I said, Gammon. So the witch doctor looked at me and said, why don't you walk about, you go look him? Why don't you go to the next village and check it out? I said, okay, I will. So I went to find the spirit of fear, quaking behind a tree, and said to him, we're going on to the next village to see if the SANGUMA thing really works or not. And he looked at me and said, why would we need to do that? I said, because we need to know. We're missionaries, and if these people need to be liberated from this, then we better know what it is. It's only a short journey, but it turned out to be like 20 miles up and down the mountains. Huge mountains in New Guinea, by the way. The tallest mountains in the world, in between the Andes and the Himalayas, are right there in this island. Close to 20,000 feet in height. Huge mountains with deep, deep valleys, and little villages perched on every ridge. So it can get a little chilly at night if you've got the right elevation, even though you're on the equator. So on we sludged toward the next village, and as we neared the next village, I had a very uncomfortable feeling, because you could hear the singing and the screaming and the crying. And I've learned something about heathen people. They do not process grief very effectively. And when somebody dies, they weep, they wail, they scream, they cut their bodies with knives, they fall on the ground and rub dirt all over themselves. And I could hear the weeping and the wailing, and something inside me said, uh-oh, there's a death in this village. And all of a sudden, all the times I'd said Gammon started to come back to haunt me. What if I was wrong? What if this really is devilish? What if they can kill somebody with hair and fingernails? So we walked into the village, and you have to get permission from the chief to come in. And the chief greeted us and welcomed us. He already knew we were coming. He even knew we were 7-day missionaries. The trees probably told him. How he found that out, I'll never know. And he welcomed us in, and I said to him, what's going on, Papa? Me heard him only to cry along like the man Mary inside on this fellow place. I'm hearing all the noise. What is it? And he looked at me seriously and said, one fellow man and me die finished. A man has died. Oh, I said, what in time? When did he die? They still tell the time by the sun. Sun in me stopped long half, and I turned to the spirit of fear and said, that could be approximately when we were back in the other village, My concern is growing. And I said to the chief, he die long one him. How did he die? And I could see that same spirit of fear. SANGUMA. This time I didn't say Giama, because I knew now that we were dealing with a very devilish thing. And only the gospel could liberate these people. So I decided, I'm a gardener. That's my hobby as a gardener. I've only ever wanted to be a gardener. I keep telling God that, but he won't let me off the hook yet. All I want is an acre of good ground, preferably in Hawaii or somewhere, where I could grow a beautiful tropical garden, and God keeps saying, not yet, my son, not yet. Because having lived in the tropics and grown all those magnificent things, I had a 5-acre garden around my house. It was just a paradise. 40 different hibiscus alone that I used to graft, half a dozen varieties on each bush. Just a paradise. 15 different coloured bougainvilleas. Can you imagine the colour as you walked out every morning? Your whole garden was alive with colour. Orchids filling up every tree. Things never die. Nothing dies in New Guinea. Even your fences grow there. You can't kill anything. It's so moist. And I decided to have a little breather, to think this thing through. So I asked the chief's permission to walk around the village, and of course the spirit of fear was keeping very close to me. So we started to walk around this heathen village. And that's when I saw it. I thought I'd seen every fruit that grew in the tropics. What's the largest fruit you've ever seen? Well, in this country, probably the watermelon, yes. But if you went to the Caribbean or somewhere, you've seen breadfruit. Yes, you have seen breadfruit, which can grow this big. It's green and all knobbly and tastes like cardboard. But I started looking at a piece of fruit. There was this tree with bright orange fruit hanging from every branch. And it would have taken 2 men with their arms out like this to encompass one piece of fruit. And I said to myself, no way. I'm already saying, how will I carry a seed back? I'll have to employ 2 men to carry one seed back. I've got to have this. And I was so excited, I forgot about SANGUMA temporarily. And I ran over to examine this tree, and I was about to slide my hand down the trunk of the tree, which was very smooth, and I thought, my goodness, it looks a bit like the skin of a eucalyptus tree. And I was about to put my hand on the tree when a young man from the village ran over and he grabbed my arm and he pulled it back with a jerk. Not going to put him on DY, master. Don't touch that tree. I said, why not? And he looked at me with that spirit of fear again, and he said, that's the SANGUMA tree. Well, I was really confused now. I said, I thought SANGUMA was magic. He said, come look in. Come and check. And he took me over, and we stood underneath one of those huge pieces of what I thought was fruit, hanging from every branch of this tree, and it was not fruit at all. They were smoked bodies, covered in a kind of an orange bark. Well, it's very common there to smoke bodies, even as a way of burial. I've been in valleys where I've seen like 2,000 smoked bodies all sitting on little chairs looking down over the village. It's not an uncommon practice. In fact, I begged my wife to promise me if I was killed in New Guinea that she would have me smoked so I could sit in the living room and grin at her forever, You can still see the features and everything. It's quite an attractive way to go, actually, I think. Anyway, here are all these smoked bodies hanging from the branches of the trees, and this young man explained to me every one of those people touched this tree and they've all died from SANGUMA. Nobody can touch this tree and live. And I said, well, being very logical, how did they get up the tree then? Oh, he said, only the witch doctor has power. This is how one man can control a whole village. I thought, wow. And I turned to the spirit of fear and I said, I've just had a great idea. And the blood drained out of his face and he said, well, I don't want to hear it. I said, what would happen if we put our sleeping bags down tonight at the base of this tree and we put our feet up against the tree. Imagine the witness we could be to this whole village. And the spirit of fear looked at me. He said, I'll tell you what, he was shaking. He said, I'll put my sleeping bag down next to yours, but you put your feet against the tree. I said, you're kidding. You don't really believe that that tree has any power over me or you? We don't have this spirit of fear, do we? There's no authority, even in the realm of the devil, if you're in Jesus Christ. Do you believe it? Well, I wish a few more Christians would act as though they have that authority in them, instead of fearing the enemy and all his schemes and the power of sin over their lives. Jesus has broken these things and set us free. Do you believe it this morning? This guy had a spirit of fear. I'm serious. He would not touch the tree. So it was getting toward sunset. So I stretched out my sleeping bag, lifted up my feet, and put them against the trunk of the tree, because I knew that nothing was going to happen to me. And the little drums began to beat all night long. One of my great frustrations as a missionary was that I was never able to learn to read those drums. Some of our older missionaries could hear the drums and they knew what they were sending out, but I didn't seem to have that gift. It was going boom, 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 boom all night long. And you know what they were sending out? Come to Kangana, man. That was the little village. They were sending it out to the whole valley, all the villages in the valley. Come to this little village by tomorrow morning, because this will be the first time in history that we've had white men's bodies to smoke and put up the tree. Had I known what they were sending out, I would not have slept so well. I fell into a deep sleep with my feet up against the tree. Because it was cool in the middle of the night, I was curled up way down inside my sleeping bag. Now, I don't know what you're like first thing in the morning. I'm not one of those people who jumps out of bed and says, look out, world, here I am. I kind of come to slowly. And so I was coming to slowly. And I'm curled up way down. Even my head is not visible. I'm way down inside the sleeping bag. And I said to myself, what is that noise? This is a village of maybe 200 people, just a little village. But the noise that I'm hearing is the sound that you would normally associate with 2,000 people, not 200 people. This is a huge crowd of people, and the New Guineans are some of the noisier people on earth. They come together, they dance, they sing, they jump up and down. They're very energized people. And I said to myself, why would there be so many people in this little village? Then I started to think, boom, 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 boom. The drums have been sending out a message all night, surely. Then it struck me, oh my goodness, they really believe that we have died. So I whispered through the sleeping bag to my buddy, the spirit of fear, are you awake? He said, I haven't been to sleep. I said, well, you know, I do believe they think that we've been killed in the night. Oh, he said, congratulations, I worked that out hours ago. Well, I said, you know, I've just had another great idea. And I heard this groan. I said, you know, if they believe we are dead, why don't we just pretend that we are? So I said to him, whatever you do, don't move. He said, don't worry, I can't. He was so frightened. So we lay there perfectly still. I've always wanted to be present at my own funeral. Wouldn't it be great to hear what they're going to say about you. And we lay there perfectly still. Everybody in the village and all the visitors were fearful of coming near us, but the chief, trying to be bold, ordered a young man to come over and find out if we were dead or alive. If you can picture this young man cautiously, gingerly coming over and leaning over because he doesn't want to touch the tree, and he puts his hand where my head is, but of course he can't see it because I'm under the sleeping bag. And without knowing whether I'm dead or alive, he turns back and shouts out to the chief, "Two fellas die finished, they're both dead." And there was an eruption, an excitement, and a singing and a dancing. It was almost deafening. You know what I said to myself? The devil believes he's won. He's trying to convince these people that their system is stronger than the Spirit which is in us. How deluded can he get? We continued to lie there perfectly still, but the chief, he was a little cynical. So he said to this young man, "Rouse him calico belong him. Me fellow like look him head belong him." They wanted to see the head. I thought, uh-oh. Now I don't know about you. I am not one of those individuals who can keep a straight face. When something very funny, I've tried, but honestly I can't do it. My humor just keeps spilling out. I can see the funny side in life, you know. And I was realizing to myself, this was truly a very funny situation, to be present at your own funeral and you're actually still alive. And so he pulls back the sleeping bag, and I took a deep breath. And I puffed out my cheeks and my eyes were bulging, and I took a big breath, and this hand, this greasy hand, came sliding down my face. Well, I don't know about you, but I lost it. So as the hand came sliding down my face, I went, "Oh!" like this. Some of them jumped just like you. This young man, I'm not exaggerating, he must have jumped 3 or 4 feet in the air. Remember, these are very superstitious people. The spirits are in everything. And he fled, and 2,000 people fled into the jungles. And we just sat up there, and I laughed, and my buddy laughed for about 20 seconds. I mean, it was incredible. Then the spirit of fear turned to me and said, "Do you think we've made them angry?" Even his attitude kept me laughing. I couldn't stop. Because we didn't know at that time, but when they had seen the color of our skin the first time, they thought we were reincarnations of their ancestors, come back in a different form. Then they knew we had been killed overnight by the tree, and they assumed we had the ability to regenerate ourselves and we'd come back to life again. And so we were like gods. It's the first time I felt how Paul felt when they thought maybe he was a god. I knew the seriousness of the situation because God was giving us a unique opportunity. The two systems were conflicting head on. The power of light against the power of darkness. They were both present there, and I just knew that God was going to win a great victory out of this. And so my buddy said to me, "What are we going to do?" I said, "We're going to sit here. We're not going to move." Because the chief must be dying of shame. The worst thing you can do to a chief or to a New Guinean is to embarrass him in front of his own tribe. And I knew that we had done this, not intentionally, but nevertheless the chief had run as quickly as everybody else into the jungle, and he must now be realizing that he has humiliated himself, and he will sooner or later come out. It took an hour. Nobody was willing to move, and we just sat perfectly still. Finally, I saw a little movement, and the chief kind of straightened up and pretended that he wasn't frightened. Took a little tentative step, then a couple more, and I encouraged him like this to come on over. And I said to him, "Hey, Papa, look in." Me all the same, one kind you. And I went like this to myself. I'm just like you. Me not a man, I'm just another man. It's all I am. And he looked at me in amazement, and this has to be a prime moment in the life of a missionary. It was the first time it ever happened to me. The chief squatted down next to me, and he said to me, "Talk savvy long me one talk. Explain to me. How's that ya? You suit him put long you long this fella DY, but you got him life he's stopped yet. How is it possible for you to touch our tree and still remain alive?" Would you consider that a grand opportunity? And I said to him, "You know, I'm only human, just like you, but I believe in Papa." Appreciated that prayer this morning. God was called Papa here this morning. I believe in Papa. He stopped on top. And Jesus, then he picking any belong him. He's picking any Jesus. And I said to him, "You know, the one true God is the one who made all things. And I am his servant." And I pulled out my little old, those old Sabbath school picture rolls. And I'd gone to all the trouble of colouring in all the angels and the skin of Jesus and everything, because it's not fair to be working in a black country and showing people a white God, is it? And we know that Jesus didn't have white skin. He had a kind of a deep olive skin anyway. And I explained to these people, this is God and this is Jesus, he's Piccaninny. You know what the chief said to me? In that one moment of time, without me giving him a Bible study, preaching any sermon, the chief knew innately that he was standing in the presence of a being far greater, far beyond anything that his tribe had ever encountered in the hundreds of years that they could trace back their history. He knew it in that one moment. I said to him, "How did you know?" He said, "I know, and these people are so close to the spiritual world." He knew immediately, and he told me later, he said, in that one moment of time, I crossed over from unbelief into belief. And in New Guinea, if a chief becomes a believer, the whole tribe becomes a believer with him. I left the two young missionaries there. 3 months later I came back. I could not believe the contrast. There were no pigs in the village. They built houses you could now stand up in. They built a little thatched roof church, and every morning a young man in a white lap would go out and blow a shell, and they'd all come and sit in this little thatched roof church and sing the same little songs and choruses that we understand. And I said, hallelujah. Why would I ever doubt the grace of God in transforming human lives? About a month later, the son of this chief said to his father, "I want to go to the neighbouring village and take the gospel there." And his father said to him, "Remember, they're still practicing SANGUMA." The son said, "But I have the Spirit of Jesus in me." He went to that village, he shared with the village, and because of traditional hospitality, they gave him a hut for the night. He lay down to sleep for the night, and the drums began to beat, and he awakened in the middle of the night. He heard the chanting. He knew they were practicing SANGUMA. They had crept into the hut in the middle of the night and cut some of his hair. He heard his own name being chanted. And at the crucial moment, the chief and the village elders rushed into the hut to claim his dead body, and they found a young man on his knees talking to Papa. Another whole village converted through the Spirit of the living God.